This story, Hardin Lang is the Vice President for Programs and Policies with Refugees International. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. via Skype. Thanks for joining us, Hardin. The UN has urged countries both within and also outside the region to allow refugees in. But where are these 500,000 people likely to end up?
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. I think the pretty clear answer to that would be a couple of major countries in the region. So we anticipate that the majority of that 500,000 would end up heading to Pakistan or attempting to head to Pakistan as the first port of call, and then Iran is the second country likely to host the most. Both Iran and Pakistan host close to 2.2 million of the 2.5 million Afghan refugees who are currently out there. So we anticipate that they will be the countries who receive the most. The concern here right now is that Pakistan and Iran are largely keeping their borders closed to Afghan refugees. And we can see in places where major border crossings exist that flows are already beginning to develop, and there's blockages at those crossing points as people try to get across. And so I think we're in for a very difficult couple of weeks and months ahead.
Then once these refugees actually make it into a country, what needs to be provided to them?
Great question. And so when the refugees actually cross, when they're allowed to actually cross into something like Pakistan, a country like Pakistan, what we want to see are basic reception, right, where they'll be granted refugee status, and then they will be given access to services, the right to work, the right to get education, the right to get health care, so the basic necessities of life. Now, that's going to be definitely a challenge in some of these countries. Some have signed the Refugee Convention or are bound by law, international law to do so. Others have not. But the key thing is going to be assistance going to those countries from Western donors and other large donors to make sure that they can help share the responsibility for taking these folks on. In addition, it will be incredibly important that refugees can be resettled out of Pakistan and Iran to countries in Europe and the United States so they can do their fair share.
What complications does the pandemic have in all of this?
Well, for one thing, the pandemic has actually hit Afghanistan incredibly hard. Right now, inside of Afghanistan, there's a drought, high food insecurity, in addition to the conflict and the pandemic. And all these factors are actually creating a humanitarian situation where over half the population needs access to assistance. And so now you can just see that the kind of pressures that are existing inside the country, when it's going to be incredibly difficult to get humanitarian assistance into Afghanistan, at least in the first couple of months as the Taliban consolidate the control. This is going to make it increasing. You're going to build pressure for people to want to flee across the border. And when they're received, how you sort of manage that process as people come across, potentially with the risk of spreading COVID, will be a challenge.
Those scenes at Kabul airport that we saw over the last sort of week or so have been heartbreaking. Who really needs to take the lead on this? 500,000 refugees.
Exactly. I don't think any of this happens. If you look at what's happening in the region, if you look what's happening farther afield in countries where Afghans will likely transit, like Turkey, trying to make their way to Europe and other destinations, you see the trend lines are going in the wrong direction, right? Borders are closing, walls are going up. If we don't see incredibly strong leadership for the United States, right, as the country that's most closely involved in the course of events that have now led to these outflows, we're not going to see the international community coming together and supporting countries in the region, doing their fair share in Europe, doing their fair share in the United States. It's going to require very strong international leadership, and the Biden administration is going to need to be at the forefront of that effort.
We appreciate your insights. Hardin Lang there, the Vice President for Programs and Policy with Refugees International.